These are the representatives of the most talented generation born in 1990. The battle of the tactician against the positional chess player. He's the most uncomfortable opponent for the world champion. All in good time, even the legends of the sport fail one day, ceding the field to a challenger thirsting for glory. I won that title, but I'll take it away. The greatest chess player of all time will again sit at the board to defend his right to be number one. But the strongest Russian grandmaster will encroach on his throne. He had to go through all the circles of hell to fight in this unbelievable battle. Many have buried Ian Nepomniachtchi's chances in this game, expecting an easy win for the world champion. But Ian Nepomniachtchi has his own opinion about it. From 26 November to 16 December, here on Chessmaster, we will witness the most awaited event in the world of chess in the last 3 years. Will Magnus manage to keep the title, or will the new king rise to the throne and take the crown to Russia? Greetings, dear chess fans and experts. This is FIDE Master Max Omariv with you. The most important chess event of the last 3 years started in Dubai. The match for the title of world champion between the challenger Ian Nepomniachtchi and current world champion Magnus Carlsen. The first game made a lot of things very clear. There was quite a stir around the match. Many people went to Dubai for the opening ceremony, but for some reason, FIDE chose not to make the press conference public. There was some strange broadcast on Instagram. But on our Instagram and Telegram channel, we post only not strange and quality news. So subscribe and don't miss anything. Ian came to the first game with his female second and a pack of cookies. And Magnus opted for mineral water. As they walked to their tables, let me tell you a little bit about the conditions of the match. It consists of 14 games, 120 minutes for the first 40 moves, followed by 60 minutes for the next 20 moves, and then 15 minutes for the rest of the game. That is quite a control. Games can be 6 or 7 hours long, and you'll see their analysis on our channel. So subscribe and click the bell button so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. Let's look at the game of the chess players. Ian started the game with the move of the king's pawn, e2, e4. This was expected. That's his main opening. But how Magnus responds to that is a kind of surprise. He can play c5, which he did in the last game against Fabiano Caruana. But in this game, he prefers e5. I'll explain why a bit later. This is the Lopez opening. And here, instead of his usual move, Magnus plays a6. This is the Lopez opening, but you can't say it's a super new way to play for him. He often does this opening. Bishop e7, rook e1, b5, bishop b3, and here Ian plays h3. This is so-called anti-martial. Martial counterattack comes after the standard c3. Here, black sacrifices a pawn with d5. Then, black plays c6 to protect the knight, moves the bishop, and comes out in this kind of attack. Here, black misses a pawn. Black has quite a serious initiative, which is enough for the equation. But this time, Magnus was not given that pleasure, although he's a persistent guy. Still, he was able to part with a pawn with the move knight a5. This is an extremely rare continuation. Much more often, they play either bishop b7 or d6. Knight a5 is a sacrifice of a pawn, and it's quite strange. Out of the blue, he gives up a central pawn, the bishop to b7. Magnus attacked e4, so d3 is a defense. And d5. Magnus wants to revive his pieces, especially since black has the advantage of 2 bishops, which is basically the only indication of potential compensation for the lost pawn. ed. The queen captures d5. Mate is on, but Ian finds a move queen captures f3. This forces the exchange of queens. The queen can't come up because the bishop is there. But then we see the bishop move to d6, and here it was necessary to show accuracy. There's the knight in danger. Instinctively, you'd want to exchange, but after that, there will be serious problems. And if you play, say, knight c3, it'll be a grave mistake. After the queen captures e5, white can safely surrender with a clear conscience. After queen b7, queen takes e1, checkmate. And after rook e5, bishop f3. And in the end, white is left either without a minor piece or without a whole rook. But Ian almost instantly played the king f1, thereby stating that he was perfectly prepared for this variant. Although this variation is very far from being popular, but Magnus did the right thing too and played rook f to b8. It's a bit of a paradoxical move, but it has a concrete intention: to protect the bishop. It would be bad to play rook a b8, because after the exchange, there would be a knight d7 fork with two rooks under attack. That's why the rook f moves to b8, the queen's exchange. Bishop d2 to keep the knight out on b4, c5. The world champion advances, trying to somehow expand the bridgeheads for his bishops. Knight f3. Knight c3. White finished the development. They still have an extra pawn, but it's not so easy to use. And here, by the move c6, Magnus states that he has new ideas. Although the move is rather unclear. And now we continue. After knight c6, bishop e3, knight e7, bishop f4, Ian plays. He wants to simplify the position, but this move spoils everything. You could have played knight g5 to keep everything intact. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. The bishop hits f3, and now the pawn structure becomes messy, or ugly, I would even say. So after rook c6, the world champion starts hunting for the weak pawns. Rook e1, knight f5. The knight wants to go to d4, but he doesn't let it with the c3 move. But the truth is that now the pawn on d3, f3, and on h3 are weak. Even the pawn on b3 could be in trouble. In general, black has full-fledged compensation here. Knight h4. Magnus already starts to attack, but the rook e3 is still there. King f8. Prophylaxis to prevent mate on the 8th line. And here Ian Nepomniachtchi goes into deep defense. He should have played king e2 to protect the pawn somehow. Maybe open a line for the second rook, but Ian Nepomniachtchi plays knight g2 in order to move the knight to e1. Here, protecting the pawn. This is the simple function the knight takes on, protecting these two pawns. And here the world champion goes on the attack. If the opponent is in such a tension, you can try to press more on him. Knight e6. Knight threatens to go to f4, so Ian has to play knight g2. His knight just serves the function of the new nightclub bouncer, who watches the entrance so no one comes in. But then, b4. Magnus bursts in through the back door. Here Ian realizes that one knight is not enough to protect all the pawns. He could have played the rook b1, but after the rook on b8, black could not move on b, capture c3, and the pawn on b3 would be in danger. It's unpleasant to stand in such a passive position, so Ian decides to just give the pawn back. King e2, king d2. He gives away a pawn, but activates his king. h4 is an important preventative move to keep the knight out of g5 and prevent the pawns from moving. King f7, rook e1, king f6, knight e3. The knight goes forward, but the world champion plays quite timidly. Rook d7 leaves the open line to pressure on pawn d3, but there was a more interesting way to play. The knight f4 to suppress the pawn. But Magnus probably didn't like that after rook a4. The knight is in danger, and it seemed to be necessary to hide it somewhere. But it was not to be, because black would have had a brilliant solution here. Rook b2, check. King b2, knight d3, and after that, the rook is lost on e1. So after the knight f4, black would have had an unpleasant initiative. Though objectively, after the knight, c4, white holds the defense, and the position is not beyond equality. But in the game, he plays rook d7, to which Ian responded with knight c4. Now there's a fork, so Magnus withdraws the rook e7. And here, Ian attacks the rook with a move of knight e5. This next move upsets us somewhat. as he simply decides to repeat. Threefold repetition and the game ends in a draw. But, to be honest, the positions are quite equal. Yes, white has more active pieces, but still, the pawns are doubled and weakened. Black is ready to counterattack on occasion, so we can't say that the decision to force a draw was some kind of cowardice. It's an extremely objective assessment of the situation. We congratulate Ian on a good game. He tested the champion in a fight. Now he can slowly get into the game, and we hope that the battle will be as competitive as possible.
This bishop f4 idea is logical, just to trade away a pair of bishops, but it doesn't work due to some also as well positional and tactical reasons. So basically, after I let these exchanges happen, it was never something I could really hope for. Yeah, more than a draw, and then after b4, well,
I wouldn't say I was ever particularly optimistic in sense, in the sense of winning the game.
And I thank you for your attention. Hit the like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my reviews of the most important chess event. Also, subscribe to our social networks, Instagram and Telegram, and explore the world of chess with us. And I'll see you in the next videos.